Welcome back. So today we're going over order of operations. Now, order of operations is like following a recipe, and if you're ever going to cook or bake something, then you'll need to follow specific instructions and in a specific order. Just like you wouldn't try to bake a cake and then just put an egg in the oven. That would not bake the cake correctly. So in this order of operations here, you need to go through each point and look at all of the steps and see what needs to happen first. So in this order of operations here, for the recipe, first off we need to start the oven and preheat it. So that would be step one. Step two would be greasing the flour pan, so that way you could have it ready to go once you get the mixture put together, or putting in those paper liners for the muffins or cupcakes. Step three, you're going to go ahead and mix all of this stuff together as far as the sugar and the butter, and then the eggs, you're going to add those one at a time, and then finally the vanilla. Step four, you're going to go ahead and combine the flour and the baking powder, and then you're going to add it to the creamed mixture. Step five, you're going to pour that into the prepared pan, and then step six, you're going to bake it for 30 to 40 minutes. If you don't follow those steps in order, then you won't get the desired outcome, which would be a delicious cake or something like that. Likewise, in math, we have an order of operations, and that order of operations helps us understand what we need to do and for the steps that we follow. And people got together and decided that this was the order that we would do things in, so that way we would get the same answer no matter who attempted the problem. So as order of operations, it provides us with a process for simplifying the expressions so that all of our answers are the same. And also, there's various ways to remember the order of operations. The one that we most likely remember is PEMDAS, which is Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally. And that one can be done as far as the information goes. We have parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Now I have this organized a little bit differently down here, and I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. So you'll notice that in this structure, parentheses is all by itself. So that's the first thing that we take care of. Then we do exponents. But then in the next row, multiplication and division, they are all can be done at the same time. You don't do multiplication first or division first. It actually moves from left to right. So in the problem, whatever happens first, that's what we'll do as far as multiplication and division, and same thing with addition and subtraction. You move from left to right and do all of the addition and subtraction in the problem. Okay, so using that order of operations, we look here at this first problem, and you'll notice that there's no parentheses, so I don't worry about parentheses, but there is an exponent. That is 2 to the second power, or 2 squared. So I start there and square 2, which would give me 4. I then bring down the rest of this stuff, so I have 8 plus 6, and then from that step I would go ahead and look at my next step, which is multiplication and division. So I go from left to right, there's multiplication, so that would be 6 times 4, which would give me 24. I then bring down the rest, and I add it together to get 42. And it looks like I jumped a little bit ahead. But from there I get 42 as a final answer if I followed the order of operations. Next, number 2, we have parentheses. So I go ahead and start with parentheses. 18 plus 6 gives me 24. Then I go down and bring the other stuff down. And my next step would be to do exponents. So I square 2 and get 4. I then bring down the 24. And my final step there would be to multiply 4 times 24, which would give me 96. Number 3. If I were to look at this one, there's no parentheses, so I don't need to worry about parentheses. And if I go through it again, there is one set of exponents. So my first step would be to square the 2 there, and that would give me 4. Once I square the 2, I then bring down the rest of the stuff. And then I go ahead and move on to my next order of operations, which is multiplication and division. So I go from left to right. There's multiplication, so I do 7 times 8, which gives me 56. And then I keep moving over, 3 times 4, which would give me 12. And now that I've done the multiplication, I bring down the rest of the stuff that wasn't done, the minus 5 and plus 3. And the plus, so the minus 5 and the plus sign. So I bring that down, and I get 56 minus 5 plus 12. When I combine all of that together, I get a grand total of 63. Number 4. If I start with number 4, I notice that first off there is parentheses, so I have to start with parentheses, and that would be 4 plus 16, which would give me 20. And now that I've done that, I can bring down the rest of the stuff, And once I bring down the rest of the stuff, I go from left to right again, and I notice, oh hey, there's exponents, so I'm going to do exponents next. 3 raised to the second power, that would be 3 times 3, or 3 squared, which would give me 9. So I'm going to go ahead and write 9 there. And then, now that I've squared that, I bring down the stuff that I didn't use, which was that 20 divided by 4, and then I bring down that plus sign. And then from my next steps, multiplication and division, I go from left to right. 20 divided by 4, so I go ahead and divide that by 4, and I get 5. And there's no other multiplication or division, so I bring down what I didn't use, and that would be the plus 9. And I get a final answer of 14. Okay, next question. On these ones, it just says to circle the operation that should be performed first in these examples here. So on this one, if I look at the order of operations, what needs to happen first? We have parentheses, subtraction, and multiplication. Well, order of operations states that parentheses is first, so I'm going to go ahead and circle the parentheses. Number 6. If I look through here, there are no parentheses. So I go to the next order of operation, exponents, and it looks like, oh, the 6 is squared, so that is an exponent. So I would go ahead and circle that as my order of operation that I would start with. Number 7, if I were to go through this one, I have parentheses. Oh, there is parentheses, so I know that that's my first order of operation, so I'm going to go ahead and circle parentheses. Number 8. There are no parentheses, so I move on to exponents. There are no exponents. And so I go to multiplication and division, and it looks like from left to right, division happens first. So I'm going to go ahead and circle division. That'll be my very first step. Number 9, I go through my order of operations, parentheses. Oh, there is parentheses, so that would be the very first step that I take. So go ahead and circle that parentheses there. And number 10 is meant to be tricky. You'll notice that this is set up to be like a fraction, but even though that's set up to be a fraction, order of operations states that we have to simplify this top part before we can divide by something on the bottom. So our first step would actually be simplifying the top or the bottom. In this case, the first thing that I would do is simplify the 4 times 8 as my first step. Okay, number 11. On number 11, it says there we need to simplify like we did before. We're going to go ahead and follow the order of operations, and now would be a good time to pause if you're going to try these on your own. So my very first step, I would go ahead and take the parentheses, and I would do that as my first step. So I'm going to go 9 plus 14 and get 23, and then I bring down the stuff I didn't use. And then I notice that 8 is squared, so I'm going to go ahead and square the 8 and get 64. And I bring down the stuff I didn't use. And now I have 15 plus 64 minus 23, and that does give me a grand total of 56. Number 12. We have 2 sets of parentheses here. So since we have 2 sets of parentheses, we'll go ahead and solve those from left to right. So 12 plus 4 is our first set of parentheses, which would give us 16. Our second set is 11 minus 7, which is 4. So I now have 16. I bring down what I didn't use, and that's that divide sign. And I would get a positive 4 as an answer. Number 13. I go ahead and take this information and see that order of operations, parentheses is first, and there is parentheses, so 9 divided by 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. I then bring down what I didn't use, and I get 16 plus 6 squared minus 3. Alright, so for our next step, we're going to go ahead and look for exponents, and exponents on here, we get 6 squared, which would give us 36. I bring down what I didn't use, and that would give me now 16 plus 36 minus 3 for a grand total of 49. Our last 5 problems here, we go ahead and take this one, and you'll notice that the order of operations, we have no parentheses, but we do have exponents, so I'm going to go ahead and take that 7 and square it, and that would give me 49. I bring down what I didn't use, which was the minus 13 divided by 24 minus 18. And then from here, I'm going to simplify the top and the bottom. So to simplify the top and the bottom, I'm going to do 49 minus 13. And once I do 49 minus 13, I get 36. Then I do 24 minus 18, and then I'm going to get a 6 there. And then for my last step would be 36 divided by 6. And that gives me a grand total of 6. Number 15. I take this one and I go ahead and start with my parentheses. And my parentheses there is 10 plus 4, so I get 14. I then bring down what I didn't use, which this is kind of fancy up here. This little 2 is above the parentheses there, which means the 14 is squared. I then bring down the minus 25. So then once I do that, 14 squared gives me 196, and that's going to be minus 25 for a grand total of 171. For our next one, we notice that we have parentheses, but also inside of that parentheses we have an exponent. So that will actually be my first step. I'm going to go ahead and square the 4, and that 4 is going to be turning into 16. I bring down what I didn't use, and I get 10 plus 16 in parentheses minus 25. I then do parentheses again, and that would be 10 plus 16, which would give me 26, and then 26 minus 5 or 25 gives me 1 as a final answer. Alright, last but not least, 17 and 18 are kind of tricky, but what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to insert grouping symbols, which is parentheses, and you're supposed to make the statement true. So we need our answer to equal 24, because currently we have here 28 minus 3, which would give us the 25, and then plus 8, and that's not equal to 24. So we need to find a way to make this equal to 24. So what you would end up doing is you would start by grouping these parentheses here, and you would say, I'm going to group those two together and see if it gives me my answer. If it doesn't, then you go ahead and backtrack and then say, okay, I'm going to try these two. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to go ahead and try the next two and try grouping them, and you can group them however you want, but you have to test to see whether or not it gives you a final answer of 24. Hopefully you've attempted it. So what I did is if I were to group together the 7 and the 3, then when we get this one, order of operations states that I have to do 7 minus 3, which is 4, 4 times 4, which is 16, and then plus 8 gives me 24. Alright, 18, same type of thing. You're going to go ahead and test out the parentheses and try different places for where they need to go to get an answer of 3. If you've tried that, then you should notice that the parentheses should go here, where we have 5 squared plus 8, and that will give us a final answer of 3 when we do the order of operations. Okay, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, let me know. Have a great day.